Welcome back to Module 3 on alcohol education. In our first video, we covered the history of alcohol and the human side of why we drink. Then, in video 2, we mapped out the physiology, exactly how alcohol impacts the brain and body, along with the Department of Transportation's strict testing thresholds. Today, we're looking at something harder to measure. This diagram shows alcohol use as a wide, continuous spectrum. It is not a binary choice between drinking responsibly and having a problem. Instead, it ranges from occasional social use on one end all the way to physical dependency on the other, with a vast amount of territory in between. Most people who drink sit right around the dead center of that spectrum. Their use is stable. They drink socially, occasionally, and without any significant consequences to their work or health. But that position is rarely static. In response to life events, a stressful period at work, a personal loss, or the slow accumulation of pressure, that cluster of points often begins to move. Usually, it slides slowly down the axis. The danger here is that alcohol misuse rarely begins with a conscious decision. No one wakes up and chooses to develop a problem. Because the slide happens in minor, incremental steps over months and years, the escalation is often completely invisible to the person going through it. People in safety-sensitive roles face specific, sustained pressures. Think of the intense isolation of long hauls down a dark, empty highway. Add in the irregular schedules, extended time away from family, and the physical demands that accumulate over years. All of this happens in an environment where the margin for error is exactly zero, and mistakes carry real, immediate consequences. When you carry that kind of load, reaching for a drink at the end of a hard week makes sense. It is legal, it works immediately to take the edge off, and it doesn't require a doctor's appointment or a prescription. In the short term, it genuinely reduces the feeling of stress. The question is, what happens to the body when that temporary post-shift coping tool quietly transforms into a daily necessity just to survive the job? This animation illustrates load-bearing stress. When alcohol repeatedly manages daily pressures, the brain adapts. Rather than regulating anxiety naturally, it outsources the job to alcohol. Soon, the original dose stops working. The brain needs more to produce the exact same relief. This is behavioral tolerance. From the inside, this doesn't feel like a chemical dependency. It feels like a minor, reasonable adjustment. What used to be 2 drinks to unwind simply becomes 3. The drinking that used to work on the weekends quietly bleeds into weeknights. The trap here is one of perception. The person drinking isn't making a conscious decision to suddenly increase their intake. They believe they are just maintaining the status quo, completely missing the fact that their consumption has steadily crept upward. While tolerance happens internally, it eventually produces external, observable behavioral patterns that indicate the drinking has crossed into dangerous territory. First, the timing shifts. Evening drinks move to the afternoon, or start when the shift ends. The environment shifts too. What was primarily social drinking slowly becomes solitary, continuing in private long after the social context is gone. Then comes the loss of intent. A person sits down planning to have 1 or 2 and consistently has more. They might even make a genuine internal promise to stop drinking entirely and then find themselves completely unable to follow through. Psychological red flags follow. This looks like actively hiding or downplaying consumption from family members. It also means intrusive cravings, finding your thoughts pulled toward drinking at inappropriate times. Eventually, this escalation reaches the workplace. Reaction times slow down marginally. A worker might start taking dangerous shortcuts they never would have considered before, and their overall situational awareness begins to narrow. Off the clock, the physical and emotional fallout takes shape. Disrupted sleep compounds into chronic fatigue, while cardiovascular and liver strain build quietly in the background. Emotionally, the person becomes increasingly irritable and withdrawn, putting severe strain on their closest relationships. This widespread degradation across a person's work, health, and home life is deeply destructive, but it is not permanent. Provided there is an early intervention, much of this destructive ground can actually be recovered. This graphic shows the most critical distinction in this entire module. On the left is the pattern stage. This is the built-up tolerance, the hidden extra drinks, and the escalating behaviors happening early on, crucially before any visible consequences have struck. On the right is the crisis stage. A crisis is late. It is the failed DOT test, the severe health event, or the broken marriage. Recovering from a crisis is possible, but it requires massive effort to rebuild what didn't have to be lost. The ultimate blind spot is the space between these two columns. Most workers miss the critical window of time between a pattern and a crisis. They don't see it because the daily changes are so quiet and incremental that they just feel like normal life. Early recognition does not require a formal diagnosis or even admitting you have a problem. It simply requires the honesty to look at your current habits clearly and the willingness to adjust course while you still have real options. In this video, we covered how alcohol operates on a spectrum, driven largely by stress. We looked at what behavioral tolerance actually feels like from the inside, the specific signs of escalation, the decline in health and daily performance, and the critical difference between a pattern and a crisis. In our fourth and final video, we close out the module by covering DOT testing, the reality of a violation, the support resources available, and what a strong safety culture looks like in practice.